What's up guys, I'm Phoenix Master 1 and welcome to my Refine review and builds guide for Ashera, Nott, Summer Ingrid, Galle, Shinon, Mustafa and Male Kris. So let us begin with Ashera, who is definitely one of the big winners of this Refine badge, and she has got a weapon Refine truly fitting a goddess. So Otter's Sentence gave her +3 attack, and now it also gives her the god effect with her weapon Refine. She can get +9 attack speed, defense and resistance in the combat, and she has got a super Blade Tome effect where she's going to be getting extra attack in the combat depending on highest total buffs among herself and the allies in 3 spaces multiplied with 1.5. So this is going to be giving you extra 36 attack if you've got an ally who's fully buffed up, and they have given that example, and that is not the hardest thing to achieve with Ashera. So she's going to be hitting extremely hard and hard enough to even kill units like Emblem Ike. And then she gets 30% damage reduction on foes' first attacks, including the brave hits, and this damage reduction is pierceable, but the next damage reduction is definitely not pierceable, and just like Yune gets damage reduction based on the debuffs, Ashera gets much better flat damage reduction on foes' first attacks depending on the highest total buffs on herself and the allies in 3 spaces, and this is going to be counted 50% of the total buffs. So if an ally has got +24 buff, she's essentially going to be getting 12 flat damage reduction, which is again not really all that hard to achieve. So this way she's able to live a lot of attacks and even function in the combat as an offense mythic unit in Ether raids. And then finally she also gets 7 HP healing after the combat, which is going to be helping her with the self-sustain. So this weapon Refine improves her combat quite a lot, and then her remix improves her supportive aspect. So at sort of turn to herself and to the allies in 3 spaces, she's going to be giving +6 attack and resistance buff, the null panic status, and now she also gives the null follow-up status. To her allies, she's going to be giving the hexblade status. She doesn't really get this herself, and to herself she gets the 50% damage reduction piercing status, which we have seen before on Legendary Camilla, and this is not a status that she gives out to the other allies. So she can give out a lot of status effects and also function as a good supportive unit while still being able to improve her own combat by getting that 50% damage reduction piercing, and also by getting the full null follow-up. She also gets +4 to all of these stats, so again she's going to be stacking up even more stats, and she can function as a pretty good combat mythic in Ether Raid's offense for the cleanup and for just finishing off any kind of enemies that are left over, and she could even function as a cav line tank because her combat has improved to the point where she's going to be hitting so hard that she can easily one-shot a lot of cav nukes which are going to be frail, and she herself is going to be getting the flat damage reduction. And she also improves her supportive capabilities, so she can function as a pretty nice Ether Raid's offense unit if she's part of your mythic core, and if you run her with Aether, then she can hit extremely hard with the treachery and the dual strike status. And even on the tanking team, she's going to be helping you activate your prime skill, and even if you don't run the prime skill, null follow-up is a status that a lot of tanks do appreciate, because nowadays a lot of fast tanks don't really have null follow-up in their weapon, so outsourcing it is pretty helpful. And she herself is going to be hitting like a truck now because of the insane extra attack she can get in the combat. She might not have the highest base attack, but this weapon Refine more than makes up for it, and it takes any kind of visible buffs of the allies in 3 spaces. So that just makes her very flexible, and all of her support is also in 3 spaces, so that's much better than the usual 2-space support that we see. And not only she can have amazing damage output, but the flat damage reduction is really going to be helping you in a pinch where you have to tank some kind of Ether Raid's offense unit, and she could function as a ranged tank. If you're going to be building up Ashera on a budget, then now she can learn level speed resistance as part of her remix. So it is going to be a pretty nice lobby skill on a budget, and you don't really have to change too much with her base kit, and she's still going to be hitting really hard, which is going to be more than enough for budget usage. And Glimmer could be a special that you could run, but ultimately the best slotty skill for her is going to be bonus doubler 4. So this goes really well with the visible buffs that she's able to give herself, and you can also run attack resistance tempo 4. So it is going to be stacking up multiplicatively with the damage reduction piercing in her slotty skill. So she's going to be having 75% damage reduction piercing, which is really good on every single hit where she's going to be hitting like a truck. And you're also going to be able to get the tempo effect, which is going to be having good synergy with the guard effect in her weapon Refine. So it is going to be making it harder for the enemies to trigger their special, And because she already gets the null follow-up status out of her Slotsy skill, she doesn't really need magical null follow-up, and instead you could run a tempo 4 skill, which is going to be working really well with her game plan. Being an infantry mage, Flare can be the special of choice so that she can get some healing out of it, and with Emblem Marth it is going to be a 2 cooldown special which you can easily trigger with the help of the tempo skill. You can also use her at max investment with Lagoose Friend 4, so this is going to be giving you the flat damage reduction based on her resistance, and you could still run bonus doubler 4 because those bonus doubler doesn't really do too much as she doesn't really have any kind of business tanking a lot of the melee threats, and as it is for her weapon refine, it is going to be active in the enemy phase against the ranged foes. So that's why you could still have bonus doubler 4, and you could run Flare as the 3 cooldown special which works perfectly well with Lagoose Friend, and you also get the full damage reduction piercing and also more true damage which makes their hit even harder. And Emblem I could be run with Flare so that you can have more unpierceable damage reduction. So Lagoose Friend 4 is really great with Ashera now because she gets like 12 flat damage reduction pretty much with her weapon refine, and then you could stack up even more with the Sloppy skill. Like I said before, Ashera could also be used as a ranged tank in Ether 8's offense against something like a Cav line. So there she could run Null Counter Disrupt to retaliate back against the Dazzling Staff or Fire Sweep effect, and she could just retaliate back with a Glimmer. That is going to be 1 cooldown with Emblem Marth. And with the finish skill, she's going to be getting more damage output and also the healing. So she could function as a secondary tank for her team of sorts, and if you're going to be using her as a tank support unit, and if you don't have Aether, then she could run the attack speed ruse skill or any kind of ruse force skill for that matter, and she already buffs up attack and resistance, so rally speed defense plus is going to be the best rally skill that you could run on her. And she can also be run on Gale Force teams, even though she cannot really Gale Force herself, but she could work as a muscle for a Gale Force team if you run into any kind of bulky unit. So she could just drop in with Wings of Mercy 4 and hit extremely hard, and even a lot of the Gale Force units do appreciate having the null follow-up and the null panic status which she can give out. One of the big winners of this weapon refine batch is also Summer Ingrid. She just gets a really stacked weapon refine, and for the people that took the refine gamble in the holoforms run, you have truly won. So Star Point Lance does give her +3 speed, and now with the weapon refine it also gives her minus some special cooldown. She also gets +9 to all of her stats, and now she's got full null follow-up and 10 HP healing after the combat. And her gimmicky weapon has been improved so much that it's hardly gimmicky, so she gets 80% damage reduction piercing on her first combat in each phase, and after that she's going to be getting still 40% damage reduction piercing, which is good because she doesn't have to completely rely on no quarter for the damage reduction piercing, and even on her regular hits she's going to be having it. And then she has got super version of Rain Snap, so in 2 spaces of an armor unit or melee infantry or melee flyer, she's able to give herself and those allies the +6 attack and speed buff, the +1 movement, the Canto 1 status, and also the special charges status. So many status effects and so much support is just amazing with Ingrid. Not only she benefits tremendously herself, but can also give this out to the other units, and she can work in a lot of Gale Force teams because of the special charges that she can easily give out. And she also gives out the Canto 1 status, so that is really good for the positioning in many of the Gale Force teams. And then finally she also has true damage based on 20% of her speed, so this improves her damage output because her attack stat is not the highest, but this definitely helps with all of the other things that she has got in this weapon refine. Unfortunately, if you got Rain Snap in the holoforms, then it is kind of rendered useless, and she might as well run Soaring Echo or even Deadly Miasma as her Slotsy skill, and she can just double and triple down on the support that she can provide. So Summer Ingrid functions as a really good lance flyer and stands out because of the support that she can give, and even her combat has become much better now where she can do so much damage and also get past a lot of the damage reduction. Going the full player phase route with her is going to be working fine because she does have the full null follow-up in her weapon, so aerial maneuvers works really well, and it does provide you the warping, and you can run Gale Force as the special because of the special charges in her weapon, and you can easily trigger it in aerial maneuvers range, so it works out really well now with her weapon refine. But if you want to have more of a mixed phase approach, then you can still run it, so you can run distant attack speed solo or attack speed prime in her slot A. With all of the visible status effects that she's able to get, Prime skill is easily something you could run, but if you only want to be susceptible to buff stealing, then distant attack speed solo does work out, and Soaring Guidance is pretty much going to be the slotty skill that you could run a lot of the times if you're not going to be giving her Soaring Echo, and you're going to be relying on Guard Bearing's damage reduction for the tanking, and Luna works out as the special if you don't want to run No Quarter, so you still have the damage reduction piercing with her weapon, so No Quarter is not as necessary as it is with a lot of the flyers. So this is the mixed phase approach that you could take with Ingrid, and you could also run her in either its offense as a Gale Force support unit. So with Garrick or Asker, she can have a 2 cooldown Gale Force with Emblem Marth, and she can easily trigger it with the special charges of her weapon. And you could run Deadly Miasma from Attuned Ivy if you're going to be giving her Soaring Echo. So that works out really well, but you just have to keep in mind that it is going to be clashing with the flame terrain of Flared Sparrow, so make sure you don't have that in the slot A. An attack speed clash can work with the Wings of Mercy build, so because she gives out the special charges to the melee infantry and melee flyers, this can easily work out with many of the Gale Force teams because you're going to be having mostly melee units. And the Canto one is also something that not a lot of units can give out, especially the ones that are going to be giving you special charges status, like Young Minerva. So that is something unique to Ingrid that she brings to the Gale Force teams. Finally, if you have extra Brattle Sharina, then you could run Attack Speed XL and Potent 4 in the slot B. So XL is going to be giving you that flat damage reduction, which is going to be working out fine with the extra movement that you can get out of her weapon. And Potent 4 could also be a pretty nice mixed phase option, giving that potent follow-up attack. So if you don't really want to run Guard Bearing, then this could definitely work out. And then Attuned Ivy is going to be giving you Deadly Miasma and Soaring Echo. So if you have those two units, then you can make this kind of max investment Summer Ingrid. And again, you could run No Quarter as her special if you want to fully pierce the damage reduction, but even if you don't run it, she's still going to be functioning fine with her Weapon Refine. Nott gets a much awaited Weapon Refine, and with her weapon she did get +3 speed and also the innate Pathfinder, and now she can give the Insighted status to the allies in 2 spaces. So this is basically going to be giving you +3 to all of your stats in the player phase, which is pretty nice for an Ether 8's defense mythic. And then she's got bonus doubler 4.5 built in. I say 4.5 because it's a bit better than the tier 4 version of bonus doubler, and it gives you +5 to all of your stats. And then she can also have the other condition of bonus doubler 4, which is going to be working with the allies in 2 space of her. And then she can also debuff the foe's attack speed and defense for -4, and to make use out of the debuffs of her menace skill, she's got the sabotage effect in the combat. So it's not really foe penalty doubler, but instead it is going to be checking the highest penalty on each stat and then giving that in combat debuff. She also gets 7 flat damage reduction on foe's first attacks, including the brave hits, so some unpierceable damage reduction is definitely pretty nice. And then she also gets special cooldown +1 on both her attacks and the enemy's attacks. And then she also has a remix, which is not the best, but still it does help her in the enemy phase. So she has got Phantom Speed +7 built in it, and she can debuff the foe for -5 attack speed and defense. She also gets true damage based on 10% of her attack, which is not really all that high, but the best useful effect out of this is definitely the 50% damage reduction piercing. And just like the tier 4 version of the dodge skills, she's going to be having dodge damage reduction up to 50% based on the speed, and she's also going to be getting this damage reduction against the AoE specials. So Nott unfortunately didn't really get as good of a Weapon Refine like her sister Dagger. Dagger gives out the Pathfinder status to her other support partner, and I mean Nott could also do that, but with maybe a different condition for Ether 8's defense, but I guess they don't really want to relive the glory days of Pathfinder Legendary Seeker shenanigans. So she gets a bit shafted in terms of providing utility to your team. Still, her supportive aspect does become a bit better with the Insighted status that you can give out, but unfortunately she doesn't really get that for herself, and her combat also improves when it comes to tanking. But unfortunately, like Dagger, she's not really going to be that good of a unit outside of Ether 8's defense, and Dagger is literally a top 10 unit in Summoner Duels metagame, so Nott is not going to be doing anything like that. It's just that she's going to be doing the things better, but not by an insane margin. Nott does get Distant Dart as her remix skill, so that could be run, and from the Divine Codes you could get Infantry Null Follow of 4. Even the tier 3 version of this is going to be pretty good from Saline, because she's going to be doubling down on her support, and she's going to be giving 2 status effects with this Slotsy skill. So it also benefits her if you run the tier 4 version, because she doesn't really have full null follow-up in her kit, and she definitely appreciates having it for the tanking. You can run Moonbow as the special, which you're going to be retaliating back with, but if you have the Vital Astra fodder, then that could be run so that it scales off her speed and you can get a bit better damage output. And when it comes to Ether Raid's defense, she's going to be running pretty much the same build as she used to before, and she's mainly there to function with the Pathfinder, to provide utility with counter control, and to be annoying to kill. And for being annoying to kill, she has got much better dodge damage reduction and the flat damage reduction. And you could also run Escutcheon as the special, so that when the enemy is doubling you, it is going to be harder for them to kill her. So it could be a bit annoying for the people that go against your Ether Raid's defense when it comes to their cleanup, or even if they're going to be using something like Gale Force Team. Counter units are way too common, so having counter control does help your Ether Raid's defense quite a lot, and she's mainly going to be used on a high threat range team like a flyer line or a cav line or a mix of those two, and there she could jump in with the rally up speed and provide the extra range with her Pathfinder. Outside of Ether Raid's defense, she could be run with distant bonus doubler because she has got bonus doubler in her weapon, and she could be run with godlike reflexes with Emblem Marth. So it is going to be a 2 cooldown special that she could loop with the special charges of her weapon, and you can also run Breath of Life 4, which can help you against the pre-combat damage and also give you the self-sustain. So this is the max investment Nott build if you want to tank with her, and if you want to use her in something like Summoner Duels or just outside of Ether Raid's defense. Galle gets a surprisingly good weapon refine, so he has got Wyvern Lance now, which is going to be giving you attack defense -5 guard crux. So it has got the same range as a crux skill in 3 rows or 3 columns centered on him. And then he also inflicts -5 attack and defense debuff on the foes, and he also inflicts a guard effect. And because it's a crux skill, it is going to be giving him and his allies the guaranteed follow-up attack, which definitely works out for him because he's pretty slow. And unlike Ashnard, thankfully he gets some kind of guaranteed follow-up attack. Ashnard definitely appreciates having Galle on the team, and Galle also appreciates Ashnard with even more attack and defense debuff and the lull rain effect that Ashnard is able to get. So it's just funny that we've got 2 Wyvern units that are really solid for their support, and both of them can be built up for free. Galle also gets 7 HP healing after the combat, so pretty nice for the self-sustain on a bulky lance flyer like this. And then he also inflicts -X debuff on foes' attack and defense, depending on 15% of his visible defense added with 5. So he's going to be mainly focusing on those 2 debuffs. And he also gets special charges per attack, so it allows him to retaliate back with a special like No Quarter, with Emblem Marth supporting him. And then finally he also has attack defense null penalty. So attack defense unity is not that great of a slotty skill for him, and attack defense clash is not fully needed, so he can definitely try and run some other slotty skills. Hopefully in future we get attack defense excel, which you would be loving with attack defense rain snap, but all of those skills don't really exist right now. So Galle, in my opinion, is an amazing real option that we've got who can function as a supportive bulky flyer. So I could definitely see him having a place in Summoner Duels as a near savior with Brave Soren. Brave Soren can be easily run so that you can have a far savior like Duo Asker with Lagoose Friend, and then you could run Ashnard or Galle, who can be a really tanky flyer who can provide even more attack and defense debuff on the foe. So there he's always going to be having that niche, and if you're going to be building him up with some of the Divine Codes fodder, then you could run him with Guard Bearing 4 as his main slot-based skill, and attack defense rain snap could be run in the future, but right now speed defense rain snap could be run, and attack defense catch can work out as a decent slotty option if you don't really have some of the more expensive skills. And No Quarter is definitely his best special because with Emblem Marth he can have it at 2 cooldown, and with these special charges of his weapon he can easily retaliate back with it. And now we have got Odd Defense Wave, so that is going to be a pretty good skill that he could run in his Slotsy while still getting the warp support with Soaring Guidance. So Odd Defense Wave is going to be giving you the full tempo effect, which is really helpful with his guard crux because the foes are not going to be charging up their special, and then you also get the special charges effect. So the null guard of Odd Defense Wave is really helpful to consistently retaliate back with No Quarters, and there are not a lot of slotty options given his weapon refine. So Close Defense 4 is one of the options where you could ignore the visible buffs of the enemy, so it does help him function as a bulky lance flyer. And like I said before, he always has that niche of functioning as a near savior with Brave Soren in Summoner Duels, and there he could be run with Wyvern Rift, and Breath of Life 4 could be run as a supportive slotsy option. So his main job is to just be there and be a nuisance with his supportive effect, and tank with the flat damage reduction of Wyvern Rift. He doesn't really get a lot of speed out of his weapon, but still, Wyvern Rift and Earth Wind boost could be obtained from Risado, and it could function in Summoner Duels because Ashnard can also run the same build and it works fine in practice. And Earth Wind boost does overlap with the guard effect in his weapon, but the extra HP from it is going to be helpful, and it already comes with Risado, so might as well run it. Shinon gets a pretty good weapon refine as a unique close counter archer, and he did have minus and special cooldown weapon, so he was the unit to introduce Deadeye, and now he can get +9 to all of his stats, and he also gets Null Guard in the combat, so it makes it a lot easier for him to trigger Deadeye and even retaliate back with Deadeye in the enemy phase. He also gets 7 HP in combat healing per attack, which does help if you're trying to tank with him with the close counter built in his weapon. He can also debuff foes' attack speed and defense depending on the number of adjacent allies times 2 subtracted from 8. So this is going to be max -8 if he's going to be solo. So it's not really the hardest to trigger it, and even if he has got one adjacent ally, he's still going to be getting the -6 debuff on the foe, and then he gets flat damage reduction on foes' first attacks, including the brave hits, depending on 20% of his speed. So flat damage reduction is definitely something he needed because as a close counter archer, he didn't really have much of a bulk for taking on the modern threats. And now at max investment, Shinon can easily take them on with this kind of flat damage reduction, and then he also gets the damage reflection after foes' first attack. So this is really strong because this can be stacked up with Brash Assault 4, and he can just hit extremely hard and even take out tanks like Emblem Ike. So Shinon becomes much better player phase archer, much better enemy phase, and much better mixed phase archer now. And he really wants to have Lagoose Friend, but even if you don't give that to him, he's still going to be functioning fine by triggering Deadeyes left, right, and center. It's also worth noting that Shinon is going to be in the pool of Holoform's Revival, so you could wait until the Holoform's Revival is decided because he could be a potential option if the Tellius badge does win, and that way you could get the premium skills on him without really spending any kind of fodder. But if you want to update him using the Divine Codes fodder, then you could run him with attack speed finish 4 so that he can have even more in combat healing and he can get the true damage, and because of the Null Guard, it is going to be pretty easy to trigger Deadeye, and physical Null Follow-up is going to be helping him not only for the Null Follow-up effect, but also with its damage reduction piercing. So on his first hit, he's not going to be having Deadeye, so some kind of damage reduction piercing is definitely pretty good, and he could also be run with Brash Assault 4 to stack up the damage reflection, which is going to be helping him immensely when he triggers Deadeye on his double. So Emblem Celica could be used with him, and Hardy Bearing could be run to take out a certain Sword Infantry Omni tank that has wreaked havoc on this game, so that is going to be helping you in that matchup. Attack Speed Pledge can also help you retaliate back with Deadeye in the enemy phase, and of course helps you in the player phase trigger Deadeye, but it is there mainly for the mixed phase. And Brash Assault 4 doesn't really get recommended that much nowadays, but it's definitely a pretty strong option for the units that have damage reflection built in their weapon like Shinon. Like I said before, he really wants to run Lagoose Friend so that he can stack up the flat damage reduction with his weapon and just function much better in the mixed phase. And attack speed finish 4 is going to be his best slotty skill, and you don't really need Deadeye when you get the full damage reduction piercing out of Lagoose Friend. So Ether could be run as the special, and you could run it with Time Pulse 4 and just retaliate back with it in the enemy phase. And again, Hardy Bearing does help him in a lot of the matchups, especially against the Desperation nukes, and also, like I said, against a certain Sword Infantry unit. His defense is not the highest, but still it is good enough to make use of with Lagoose Friend at this kind of max investment. Ashera and Summer Ingrid might be competing for the first place when it comes to this refinery batch, but for sure the last place is gonna be of Mustafa because Plagian War Axe is not the greatest weapon. It's kinda 2 years old, so to himself and to the allies in 2 spaces, he gives out the +6 defense and resistance buff, which is good, but then he gives out the follow-up denial status, which is kinda irrelevant because of the null follow-up that we have nowadays. And even against half null follow-up, this is going to be getting completely negated. So it's not the biggest effect that you want to have. And then he gets +8 to all of these stats in the combat. He also gets the guaranteed follow-up attack, which is kind of the bare minimum. And then he also gets true damage based on 15% of foes' attack stat. And then finally, he gets 40% damage reduction on foes' first attacks, including the brave hits. So this is barely better than Arcane Downfall. And I mean, that isn't really a high bar. Unfortunately, he doesn't really get much out of this weapon refine. And even though he's an easily mergeable option, he's really not going to be standing out much when it comes to axe infantry units and the sea of grail options that we've got in that class type. If you don't have Lagu's Friend to give to him, then you could run Special Spiral 4 for the damage reduction piercing, and Fire Flood Boost 3 could be run because he doesn't really get the guard effect out of his weapon. So this could be run, and then he could also stack up even more HP, and his HP is high enough to easily make use of Infantry Pulse 4, so it could help you with the pre-charging of Special Spiral and just giving more support to your allies. And because he already gives himself the defense and resistance buff, Attack Oath Echo could be run so that he could get the attack buff and also the order status. And this encounter melee could easily be run because he can tank a lot of the range threats, and he could retaliate back with Bonfire when he has got Special Spiral 4 charged up. If you've got Lagu's Friend 4, then by far it is going to be the best Lot B option that he could run on him. So it is going to be giving him that flat damage reduction which he really needs with this kind of mediocre weapon refine. So at least it is going to be a bit better. And then he could run Defense Rest Finish 4 in his slot A to get some healing. And speaking of healing, Breath of Life 4 is also going to be helping you, so that could also be run as a tanking option. And Lagu's Friend 4 is going to be doing a lot of heavy lifting here, giving you the unpierceable damage reduction and also giving you the full damage reduction piercing. So he could retaliate back with Ignis with Emblem Marth, and that is going to be doing a lot of damage. There's not a lot of you can do with this kind of weapon refine and its stat spread, but this is pretty much something that he could run at max investment. Male Kris patiently waited for 2 months only to get the same weapon refine as his female counterpart, so nothing really has changed. He still gets minus in special cooldown out of this weapon and the full null penalties, which is actually pretty helpful with the sabotage and deploy effects going around. And then he can debuff the foe's attack speed and defense by -5. And he has got the full tempo effect, and he's definitely not the first sword infantry unit or the second one to have the full tempo effect in his weapon. He also gets +4 to all of his stats in the combat, and then 40% damage reduction on foes' first attacks, including the brave hits. He also gets true damage based on 20% of his speed, and then finally he has got 7 HP healing in combat per attack. So a lot of these effects are a bit generic, but still they work out fine. But it is going to be much harder for male Kris because he has got more competition than female Kris has got when it comes to the lance infantry class type. And sword infantry archetype is just really competitive, but at least this weapon refine is better than a lot of the previous weapon refines that we have got on many of these sword units. So if you're a big fan of him, it could still work out. With this weapon, you pretty much want to take the route of being a god sword and running godlike reflexes to get some unpierceable damage reduction, and then having Emblem Ike for more unpierceable damage reduction. And with the divine codes, you could get attack speed finish 4 and buffer 4, which is going to be pre-charging your godlike reflexes. And then defense rest pledge is going to be helping you loop it, and the tempo effect from his weapon does help you with that, so that is definitely a route you can take. And spurn 4 could also be run, but buffer 4 I feel like is the best slot B option if you're going to be running a speed-based damage reduction skill. But if you have the fodder, then you could definitely run Lagu's Friend and stack up a lot of stats with distant bonus doubler and bonus doubler sacred seal. So Lagu's Friend doesn't really care about the cooldown restriction when it comes to the defensive special, so that's why godlike reflexes could easily be run. And if you're trying to maximize the flat damage reduction, then you could run attack speed excel. So it's definitely going to be a really insane investment skill, but in the enemy phase against the foe's specials, you're still going to be able to get that flat damage reduction in the enemy phase. And with Emblem Ike, with godlike reflexes, with Lagu's Friend, you're going to be stacking up a lot of unpierceable damage reduction. I want to thank all of my YouTube members for their constant support, and you can click the link on the screen right now to check out my breakdown of the latest summer banner, and make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell, because YouTube sub boxes are about as functional as the Plagian effect and Mustafa's Plagian War Axe. So with that, I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day.